Welcome to the Big Four Accounting Firms podcast, brought to you by big4accountingfirms.com. This is episode 48. Today we're going to be talking about how to transition from public accounting, or the Big Four, into finance or consulting. Many people in public accounting want to transition into a finance or consulting role. Now, why is this? You might have your own reasons, but let's explore why other people might want to transition into a finance or consulting role. The reasons that people want to go into finance and consulting is because finance and consulting professionals are seen as more of front office roles versus accounting. Accounting is often seen as more of a back office role and has a negative connotation. If you work in the Big Four, and especially in assurance, your clients typically dread seeing you, or at least that's the stereotype of accountants and auditors, that clients hate seeing their auditors. Now, if you are in the finance profession, there's a perception that you are helping a company take their existing money and multiply that and make them more money. And another reason people choose finance is just because of the way it is portrayed in the media and in movies. You have movies like Wall Street and The Wolf of Wall Street that really speak to young men. Even though in those movies it did not end well for the main characters, people still think that being on Wall Street equals cool. Additionally, the media, such as the Wall Street Journal, is constantly fascinated with CEOs and CFOs, and that gives the finance role more of a celebrity feeling to it. And the same goes for consulting. Consulting is often seen as beneficial and helping the client out. And there are plenty of headlines out there in things like the Wall Street Journal around consultants helping firms out. Consulting has a positive connotation to it as well, as opposed to the negative connotation of accounting. Now let's first talk about how to transition into consulting. It is much easier to transition into consulting now than it was 10 years ago. This is because 10 years ago, the Big Four accounting firms did not have large consulting practices after many of them sold their consulting practices after Sarbanes-Oxley. But that's changed, and now all of the Big Four have large advisory or consulting practices. And you can tell this by the amount of revenue that each of them earn from advisory each year, and that amount is only growing. So to transition into consulting, you merely need to research how you transfer within the Big Four accounting firms, how to transfer from assurance or tax into advisory. And this process is different within each firm. It is usually easier to transfer as an associate because there are more openings. The Big Four can fill one of their consulting openings for new recruits with existing experienced staff. For example, if you're an experienced staff in assurance or tax, then it'll be easier for you. And what are some of the most popular types of advisory or consulting? Most popular types of advisory in the Big Four are mergers and acquisitions or deal advisory and accounting advisory. It would be easiest for an existing assurance personnel to transfer into accounting advisory practice since they likely already have experience with auditing and accounting. And they can use the knowledge gained from auditing companies and seeing accounting systems and accounting statements to help other companies improve their accounting systems or existing accounting policies, or develop accounting policies that they don't have, or improve internal controls. Those are the types of things that you'll be helping with if you go into accounting advisory. Now, M&A consulting is also popular within the Big Four because of what we previously talked about. Mergers and acquisitions are very popular in the media. They're always front page of things like the Wall Street Journal and Forbes and Fortune. For example, Amazon's acquisition of Whole Foods was all over the headlines recently, and people want to be associated with things like that, things that hit the headlines. They want to say, I worked on that deal, I helped with that deal. And what the Big Four do in this space is that they perform the accounting due diligence or even the tax due diligence on the side of these transactions. And that's what you would most likely help with on the M&A advisory side within the Big Four. Now that's for consulting. Let's talk about finance. How can someone in the Big Four transition into a finance role? First, you need to determine which area of finance you want to go into. You want to be a CFO, a treasurer, or an investment banker. You need to figure out which area you want to go in before you start your transition. And that way, you can start developing the skills necessary and target the roles specifically. And a lot of people often wonder if you have to be in a specific practice. Do you have to be in assurance or audit, or do you have to be in tax, or can tax people even get there? And I just wanted to say that I've seen both assurance and tax people obtain the title of CFO. So even though you might be in tax, don't let that keep you from your dreams of being in finance or achieving a job as CFO. I've seen at least 3 people from tax go on to be CFOs. And one of them went on to a very large company and became a CFO and was very successful. But one of the easiest ways to make this transition is to build out your network. Having a strong network will help you easily transition into a CFO type of role. Most of the people that I know that became CFOs got the job through some sort of networking. They knew the right people when the position of CFO or a position right below the CFO opened up. And accepting a position directly below a CFO is not a bad position. And it's not because the CFO might be leaving soon. And when the CFO is considering his succession planning, you might be considered for that succession plan. So don't only be looking for open CFO roles, be looking for roles that are direct line to the CFO. And this is why I mentioned treasurer role as well, because treasurer often precede the CFO. So they often take the leap from treasury to CFO. And accepting a controller role is another way to get closer to the CFO or treasurer title. And another job that many Big Four professionals want in finance is investment banker. And the best way to obtain this job is by obtaining good reviews while you're in the Big Four. Since investment banking is a very high performing culture, you want to have a strong history of high performing culture that you can speak about in your interviews at various investment banks. And it would also be helpful if you are currently in the financial services line of service in your firm. And that way, because investment banking is financial services related, you want to have some experience in seeing financial services. And it would also be especially helpful if you're in the M&A advisory group that we were speaking about earlier, because it'll be easier to transfer from an M&A advisory or due diligence type of role to going over to investment banking and helping with financing deals and conducting due diligence and helping on the M&A side and investment banking. For example, on the Amazon deal that we were just speaking about, it was Goldman Sachs that helped obtain the financing and all that, and they obtained a large fee from that. So if you have some experience in M&A while you're at the Big Four, then that would be good. So it might be good to transition into a more consulting role within the Big Four, make sure you get high performing marks, and then transition into investment banking. But no matter which group you're planning to transition into, whether it's consulting or finance, you need to make sure that you start today. Don't think you can just wait around and somebody's going to pluck you out of the group and say that guy is ready for a role in finance or that kid's ready for a role in consulting. You need to put it in your mind and you need to start working towards it and make it a goal. And that way you can learn about the skills that you need to get there and you can start applying for positions and knowing what you need to get to those positions. So in conclusion, you can transition into finance and consulting from the Big Four. You just have to figure out which role you want and get started on it, like I said before. You can't just hope that somebody's going to notice you and say that kid's ready for a finance or consulting role. Get started today. Thanks for listening. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast, share it with a friend, and make sure to visit our website, big4accountingfirms.com. Thanks for listening.